Hi everyone, it's Rena. So this video is looking at the full Hunter's Moon, which is happening on October 17th, 2024 at 6:27 a.m. Central Standard Time in the USA. This will be probably for most people on the 17th. I'm trying to think of the Southern Hemisphere because I think it's about 16 hours ahead of me in the Midwest. I think it might even be there on the 17th, but if it's on the 18th, it'll be probably the early hours. And this is in Aries, and Aries is a very explosive sign. So, wow, this is going to be quite a doozy. I would say, luckily, this is happening in my time zone. It's going to be, early Thursday morning. So this is not the weekend, but I do feel like that energy will be carrying over into the weekend since it's a Thursday. Definitely, very much in play the next night. So we could be seeing a very explosive weekend. Hopefully I'm just saying that metaphorically, not literally or figuratively, I should say. So what I want to say first and foremost is I mentioned the Hunter's Moon, and according to almanac.com, which always talks about the name of each full moon, according to Native Americans and sometimes Europeans also had their own names for the full moon too. This one has to do with, hunting before winter time. So that's why it's called that. Oh, I just thought of something else. I'm not gonna bring it up. It's part of the conspiracy theory. Well, I'll just say, like, if anybody knows about certain things, they go, the hunter will be hunted. Um, that was like one of the clues. But yeah, I mean, and things are heating up in the United States. We're having a presidential election the first week in November, and so there's a, a long tradition in the United States of something called the October surprise. And that's when one particular political party pulls some kind of like last minute exposure, scandal, whatever. But sometimes it can be like something that they have created themselves, to promote themselves. And it ends up making the other party look bad right before the election in order to win, and kind of like a surprise attack, if you will. For instance, Ronald Reagan did that in 1980. He arranged to have the hostages, freed from Iran. And I think that was an October surprise. But anyway, I mean, they came home on election day, let's put it that, or inauguration day. So I think I'm correct about that. But anyway, they do things like that to try to kind of one up the other side. So suffice it to say, the United States politics is going to be super intense. I'm recording this during the first week in October, and it's already, you can feel it in the air. You can tell. It's like you're waiting for the other shoe to drop. And I think that full moon in Aries is the other shoe dropping. And it will be a domino effect, I feel, and it has been kind of predicted by other people, because it's like a linchpin. It's like you have one thing that sets off everything else. Sometimes we have like these pieces of disclosure, and people might be very surprised by it. An example is what happened with P. Diddy very recently, and so it got a lot of people talking, but it didn't have that immediate domino effect of different things falling after it. And that's what we're talking about. Now, the likelihood of having a domino effect happen at this time, in my opinion, is very good, because Aries is a cardinal sign. It's the first sign of the zodiac, and cardinal signs are very active. They're very action oriented, and so they symbolize movement. This is why they represent all four seasons. For instance, we just had in the Northern Hemisphere the fall equinox. That's when the sun goes into Libra. The equinoxes, the solstices are considered high energy because the sun is going into a cardinal sign, and it does tend to herald change because things start to heat up. You know, if you are a cardinal sign, or you know a cardinal sign, and the four cardinal signs are Libra, Aries, Cancer, and Capricorn, if you know anybody of those signs, you probably know how dynamic they are and how they tend to take action rather than just talking about what they're doing. So we can expect a major event or a series of important events around the middle of October. Like I said, as I'm recording this in the first week of October, we're already starting to have all of this heating up. And heat is a perfect word for it because Aries is a fire sign. Now, in terms of cycles, I have heard astrologers talk about the cycle of a new moon and then a full moon. So that's going to be within a 2-week period from one to the other. And how, you have the manifestation is the full moon, and the new moon is planting the seeds. But there's also a cycle of one full moon to the next. Just like there's a cycle from one new moon to the next. So the cycle from one full moon to the next, in terms of the symbolism, what it represents, last month in September, which was also the 17th, we didn't just have any old garden variety full moon. We had a lunar eclipse in Pisces. And Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac, and a lunar eclipse is a very powerful full moon. So talk about going out with a bang. So we ended that cycle of, the full moons between 2023 and 2024. So this is kicking off a whole new series of full moons. Full moons can be a time when things come to an end. They can also be a time when things come to fruition, or you could say to their highest extent. So there is a slight difference between saying fruition and I know there's another term besides highest extent. That's kind of awkward, but you know what I mean. To the furthest they can go. There is a difference there, because fruition implies that something is kind of blooming, blossoming, kind of fruiting. It's providing something of substance. This is, what I meant to say with the alternative possibility is running its course. So that's why we could say about endings, because, sometimes things run their course. Like a marriage can run its course. You try, and then you have to accept the fact that it's just not working and you move on. Sometimes the ego doesn't like to admit that they or feels that they have failed. Doesn't mean that they have failed. It just means that um, maybe that season of life is over with. And actually, that was a good example because we're talking about the opposition here, and that's what a full moon is when the sun is at the exact same degree in the opposite sign. So in this case, we're talking about Libra and Aries. In astrology, Libra rules the seventh house of committed partnership, and Aries rules the first house of the self. So this we could say a dichotomy between me and we is something that anyone who's ever been in a relationship, a serious relationship, grapples with. Because it's like, there was a pop psychology book, I don't know if it was the 70s or whatever, but it was called something like, do I have to give up part of me to become part of you, or something like that. And it was just basically this idea, I think, of codependency or losing yourself in another person. So I can see here when I look at the aspects that there could be things going on that are connected with relationships. Although Venus and Mars are trined at this time. Venus in Scorpio and Mars in Cancer. Water signs as well. So the emotions are heightened, but they also will give sensitivity and insight into the human condition. Libra is the peacemaker. And Libra, because Libra is ruled by Venus, and Aries is ruled by Mars, the god of war, so they couldn't be more different in how they function. And you could say that the moon is the star of the show because that's what we're talking about here is the full moon. And I believe it's going to be a supermoon, if I'm not mistaken. But it's going to be, I think it's the last supermoon of the year. I think. I should have looked that up beforehand. But anyway, it's in Aries. Aries is the first sign of the zodiac, and it is Aries rules the first house in astrology of the self. So this can be a time of self-discovery. This can be a time of realizing that you are someone who needs freedom. So I mean, obviously it will affect relationships the most with people who have either Aries or Libra at the 24-degree mark, whatever, that if it falls in your seventh house or your first house, because then it'll oppose it to the seventh, that it will be most about relationships, like relationships that are already committed relationships. But in a broader sense, this could affect all of us in some way. And there's sometimes people get like this where they, especially if you're like a fire sign or an air sign, where you really value your freedom and yet you've fallen in love and you're like, how can I make this work where I can feel the beautiful things that love provides, but I don't feel suffocated. I don't feel like I am obliged to have to spend every waking moment with my beloved, where, I trust them, they trust me, and we don't have to keep tabs on each other 24/7. We can have separate activities, we can have separate friends. We don't have to do everything together. Libra likes to do things as a couple. Aries is very much their own person and is more than capable of acting alone, doing things alone. But Aries people might want partners too, so it's just that there's more with certain signs. There are going to be more stipulations that have to be kind of met first before such a person fully commits. So let me talk about some of the other things that are going on. We have Mercury in Scorpio, Venus in Scorpio, Mars in Cancer, and so I want to talk about that because I heard another astrologer talking about Mars in Cancer and how touchy it is, and we've already had it. It isn't entering Cancer during this time. It already has been there, and it's there right now as I, record in early October and talk about hypersensitive. Yes, definitely. This transit of Mars in Cancer can produce a lot of that kind of emotional excess, snowflake tendencies, that sort of thing. So this will still be ongoing at the time of this full moon. And of course, because of heightened emotions and Cancer's ruled by the moon, expect that to, reach a fever pitch. And actually, when I look at some of these aspects, they're pretty intense. So I just want to, I guess I covered all the inner planets. So let me give you a rundown on some of these difficult aspects. The big one is Mars. And, of course, the moon being in Aries, ruled by Mars, Aries. So we have that warrior-like energy. Well, yeah, it can be brave. A warrior can be brave. So there might be, even now in early October, there are rumblings of this because of certain situations that have arisen where people are, part of it is the individual, not like, somebody who is self-reliant. We had a hurricane that affected, or other things, other kind of maybe some additional weaponry that affected different states and decimated some areas in the southeast of the United States. And people were looking for the government to save them, rightly so, because that's how we've been conditioned to do. And guess what? It didn't happen. And so, I've been avidly following this because this has been a theme, not just this year. This has been a theme in recent years of people saying, you know what, we cannot rely on this anymore. And of course, Pluto is still retrograding at that 29th degree of Capricorn. So it's the remnants of the old guard, the remnants of the old structures, I should say, too. And it's like really showcasing how that has not served us. And so even though it's heartbreaking because of the results of what has happened, in another sense, it's a very good illustration of why we have to do for self. And that's what Aries is all about, is that sovereignty, that self-sufficiency, and the bravery, because the bravery is really important too, the ability to um, go out on one's own and be independent like that and take a risk. But on the other hand, Aries is very impatient and rash. It's itching to take action. It's very reactionary. The word action is in reactionary, but of course it's kind of like describing like an emotional response. And so Aries can be very quick to anger, okay? What comes to mind, the word that came to mind right now for me is awakening, because the sun is squaring Mars, and the sun is also squaring Pluto, opposing Chiron. Okay, so the sun is our, core identity in this lifetime. And but it's a mundane identity. It's not our, higher self. It's our identity as we're connected to this plane of existence. And people, because of the conditioning that we have had, we tend to view ourselves through that lens. As we, raise our vibration, go through various, I don't think it's just one, usually spiritual awakenings in our lifetime. We upgrade ourselves spiritually. We begin to see ourselves differently, and our role here differently. But those souls that are just beginning to awaken, maybe they've been asleep this whole time, there could be an event that happens at the time of this full moon. I mean, it's a little bit tricky sometimes to kind of pinpoint it to this particular day, but it could be the catalyst, because Aries is a catalyst type of a vibe. Could very well be. Kind of like the American Revolution happened during the sign of Aries, or around, it was like April 19th. It was around the time when Aries begins. Maybe it was a day before or something like that. But I mean, not begins but ends. So it might have still been in Aries, but whatever. The point is that the warrior energy is very responsive to kind of like another side. So there's like that tendency to pick a side and to be fighting for something. And because of these hard angles to the sun, certain people, I don't think this is true of um, souls that have already, undergone a spiritual upgrade, and they know, they have like, basic understanding of things at a higher level, especially what's been happening in the last few years. But there are a lot of people that are just beginning that process of waking up, and little things are starting to add up for them. And at this time, there can be that cognitive dissonance between, who they thought they were and what is currently in front of them. And it could be kind of a blow to their sense of self for some reason. So an example would be during the Great Depression, when we had this, you know, traumatic event of the stocks just crashing, and people who had great wealth just, losing it all at once. And that sense of like, that was how they viewed themselves, as being a wealthy person. And all of a sudden they didn't have that. And, some people lost it because they just couldn't contain that possibility. It was just too quick of a change. So, yes, we could have something and it could be very rapid, something that challenges certain people's identities in some way, or their worldview. I mean, that's part of our identity. And then that causes some people to go a little bit crazy. And going a little bit crazy can mean that they do things without thinking, because we have the moon squaring Mars. That is a classic thing for the person acting out of emotion, which is really a bad idea. Another hard angle that is concerning is Mars opposing Pluto, because Pluto can be control, and Mars is the rebellious energy, but also it's rash, and it's also in a hypersensitive sign like Cancer. So the emotions are running high just from that. It's almost like infusing that full moon with that Cancerian energy in a sense, because it's making contact with the moon. And by the way, the sun squaring Mars is like the person who feels like they are the underdog and they have a chip on their shoulder and they need to prove themselves. And this happens when somebody feels like a blow to their self-esteem, when they feel like they have been degraded in some way, disrespected. Also, the sun squaring Pluto can be that feeling of the sense of your light being kind of like obscured by the Pluto darkness, the Pluto heaviness. And that's can be, even though that, the phrase or the term authority figure came into my mind, that is mostly assigned to Saturn, but you could say by virtue of what we're dealing with here that could be Pluto too. But here's the interesting thing about Pluto. Pluto has a covert connection to it. So it's like having your strings pulled, but from like a covert perspective or place. So it's very important, I've said this before, that if people feel like they want to run into the streets and protest something, you better be damn sure you know what the hell is really going on. Because some of these events, maybe most of them, can be manipulated because they're looking for people to, act up so that they can either like enact some kind of like draconian rule, rulership, like martial law. That's what they call in the United States, or something where they can really control you that much more, and they can use your rebellion as the excuse to do so. But also getting sucked up into something that you have no idea what you just got yourself into. I mean, I'm all in favor of speaking your mind, and even, I don't have a problem with protesting, although I think that it's kind of an empty gesture a lot of times. I don't think it really, I think it's really like a feel good where it kind of, you can get out your aggression and think that you did something, but you really didn't do much of anything. I think the French seem to, I have a bit more respect for some of these Europeans, because they come out like big time. It's not just, a few thousand. They just like take up so much space. And it really shows the government that there's a resounding rejection of whatever it is that they're trying to implement. And some of them have been very persistent about whatever it is that they are against. So anyway, I just wanted to point that out because I think that that's very important. So also, in terms of Pluto, the moon is squaring Pluto, as is Mercury. So there could be something with communication that is, like trying, that is blocked, really. And it could be being blocked in a covert way, like shadow banning. Hello. Shadow banning is really pimpy because they're giving you the illusion of the fact that you're actually being able to post, but they're kind of like uh, blocking you to some level, but it's covertly. They won't even come out and let you know that they've blocked you. So it could be something along those lines. But, like I said, this is happening on a weekday. So that, which really doesn't mean much of anything, because even if it was a weekday, if there was something that was really, really, so beyond the pale, people would just be like, okay, that's it. I'm done. So, and it is a Thursday, so it is close to the weekend. I don't know why I keep obsessing about the weekend, but, you know, I just feel like there's like crimes of opportunity sometimes when people take to the street, and it's a time when people might be going to a bar, or that can just be fuel on the gasoline, or flames on the gasoline. So, I guess we have to just grin and bear it and realize that to get to the promised land, it can be messy. And I mean, this is really, you know, what they call, I think they call it go time, when it's time to go, when it's time to, when everything is starting to gel. And Aries, again, is this initiatory type of an energy. So that can be what is in the air that night. And now I'm thinking of Phil Collins. But anyway, I hope that you enjoyed this. And I hope that wherever you are in the world, that you are welcoming change. Because sometimes change is scary, especially when we're breaking free from elements that don't want us to be free. You know, um, it's like if you're a teenager and let's say you're 18 years old and you're going off to college, or you're moving out of the house, and you have a parent who doesn't want you to leave. Even though they might know that it's good for you and that that's normal, that you would go and it has nothing to do with you, they still kind of are holding on to you and maybe guilting you or doing something to try to get you to stay, and you know that it's time for you to go. Well, for all of us, we're like kind of experience it from both ends. We may not want the old to end because it's familiar to us, but we have no other choice. It's for the highest good. So, God bless you all.